Welcome to Bed Crime Stories podcast. I'm your host, T, and if true crime is your jam, and like me you enjoy delving into unsolved cases, trying to figure out who done it, please consider subscribing. Also, if you enjoy my videos, please hit that like button. Several key happenings this week in the Summer Wells case. First, YouTuber Ziggy released a phone call that she had with Fred Hill. Hill, if you don't know, is a neighbor of the Wells. He lives in Beech Creek, a ways down the road from 110 Ben Hill Road. Ziggy has forged an unlikely friendship of sorts with Hill and his wife, and she's convinced Hill is a good guy. She discussed the shooting incident in which Fred shot a man who trespassed on his mother's property. According to Ziggy, Fred shot the man in self-defense after the guy was dangerously firing shots late one night on or near Fred's mother's property. This paints Fred Hill in a whole different light. Perhaps he isn't one of the bad guys in Beech Creek after all. It sounds like he was at least justified in shooting that man. In the released call, Fred tells Ziggy that the TBI asked him to wear a device to record conversations with Don Wells, and that he agreed to do this. If this is true, then the TBI were looking at Don Wells early on and felt Fred Hill could help them get information as to what may have happened to 5-year-old Summer. Fred told Ziggy that he would put the device on and then go over to the Wells property to talk to Don. The TBI could hear what Fred and Don were talking about in real time. I'm picturing law enforcement agents sitting in a van somewhere near 110 Ben Hill Road, sipping coffee as they listen in on the conversations, and if trouble should arise, they can be armed and ready to pounce in an instant, just like in the movies. That's probably not how it all went down, but I have a vivid imagination. According to Fred, one time when he was talking to Don with the device on, he suddenly heard someone laugh out loud, and so did Don. Fred had to play it off as being something that came out of his phone, but it was clearly coming out of the device. The TBI allegedly heard the laughter too, but when they went to process the recording, the laughter wasn't there. What could that have been? Was it a third party somehow listening in? Another mysterious occurrence in the Summer Wells case. But it would seem that Fred Hill never got any concrete information from Don because so far no one's been arrested in connection with Summer's disappearance. Fred has thus been outed as a snitch of sorts, but he was allegedly doing it to help find Summer, so it's hard to find fault with that. So I would say Fred Hill has been an asset to the case in some way, although I'm still not over his shenanigans with the deer bones. Sorry, but pranks like that don't help the case. Of course, Fred is not the only one who pulled jokes on YouTubers. Candace Bly and Don Wells are guilty of the same thing, but perhaps this type of behavior is just holler humor, something you don't get unless you live in Beech Creek. If Fred Hill really is trying to help find Summer, then I thank him profusely, and I apologize for viewing him as one of the scary people living in the holler. The next tidbit of news is that Andy Bernard and his girlfriend paid a visit to the sheriff's office yesterday. Piper of CSI, or Crowdsourced Illuminations, announced this on her community page. It would appear that Bernard was summoned there. Although I'm not sure of that because that's not exactly what was said. He could have just as easily gone down there because he wanted to talk to law enforcement. But I'm fairly certain he was summoned. Neither Bernard nor his girlfriend ended up in jail after the visit. Was Bernard there to discuss the allegations his ex, Jodi Sue Brown, made against him? The timing would certainly make it seem like that's a possibility. If he was summoned so that he could respond to Jodi Sue's allegations, then I feel like law enforcement is maybe doing its job. What comes of these conversations, that remains to be seen. Will they lead to concrete answers as to what happened to Summer and where she is? Doubtful, because Andy Bernard did his first live panel on his channel the other night, and he was basically denying selling anything other than weed to the Wells, and definitely denied selling weed or anything else to the kids over there. If he did sell weed to the kids, he's not copying to it, and he made it clear that he doesn't like jail any more than Don Wells does. So there's that. It appears that Jodi Sue Brown, too, was summoned to the sheriff's office yesterday. News leaked early on in the day saying that she was called down to the sheriff's office. Then in her live last night, she said that someone told her to her face that Tiffany Marie isn't helping Summer's case, and that we can take that as we will. To me, this was Brown's way of implying that she had been in contact with law enforcement that day. Perhaps she really did take a trip down to Ronnie Lawson's office. The only thing I find suspicious is that Jodi Sue called out Tiffany Marie specifically. Did law enforcement really say that Tiffany Marie isn't helping Summer's case? I doubt it. We know Lawson doesn't like social media, so it's more likely that he would have lumped all creators into one box and said YouTubers aren't helping. That seems more reasonable. Anyone following the case is aware that Jodi Sue had a falling out with Tiffany Marie last week because Tiffany dared to ask the necessary questions after Jodi Sue made those scathing allegations against Andy Bernard. Despite Tiffany being Jodi Sue's fierce defender for many, many months, Jodi Sue apparently feels no loyalty to her and has been blasting her mercilessly night after night. But that is Jodi Sue's MO. She enjoys railing against anyone who dares to confront her or question things she said. So now Jodi Sue stands alone, left only with her bevy of loyal subscribers who write things like, "I'm sorry everyone is treating you like this, and I can't believe how mean people are." All of these subscribers ignoring the mean things that Jodi Sue has said about other people, including the late Jose Roman, Andy Bernard, Andy Bernard's girlfriend, who she calls Coleslaw, all YouTube creators pretty much, now Tiffany Marie, and anyone else who doesn't cotton to her storyline. Now, in Andy Bernard's live, he answered quite a few questions. Here are some of the key things he stated. Andy said nothing unusual was happening in the days before Summer's disappearance. He mentioned Jackie Dobbs being in Beach Creek on June 14th, and he talked about the tree cutters. He said that there were official tree cutting company trucks, but there may have also been some private vehicles parked in Beach Creek that belonged to some of the tree cutters. Andy mentioned that there was always a lot of traffic along Ben Hill Road. Now, that's new information. Everyone else has pretty much said Beach Creek was a quiet place where you'd only go if you lived there, but it appears that Bernard may have been referring to people who live in Beach Creek and how they are always coming and going. That's kind of how he explained that away. When asked about his activities on June 15th, 2021, the day Summer was reported missing, Bernard said he left his house to head to work around 8:05 a.m., which was a little late for him. When asked if he left work at any time that day, Bernard replied, "I don't believe so. Pretty much, once you're there, you're stuck there. It never slowed down. One of the busiest places in Kingsport." End quote. He said he left work around 5:45 p.m., messaged Jodi Sue at 6:05 p.m., and arrived home to Ben Hill Road around 6:20 and 6:30 p.m. It was still light outside when he pulled up. According to Andy, the law showed up right around the same time as he did, or perhaps a little after he did. When asked if he was in Beach Creek at 3 or 3:30 p.m. that day, which is what his cousin, Fred Hill, has alleged, Andy replied no and says that he recalls the incident and that Fred almost took the door off of his Kia because he was driving so fast. Bernard says that this had to have happened the day before Summer disappeared or a day or two after, but it wasn't on the 15th. Andy did say that he and Fred had words either the day before Summer went missing or a day or two after, and that was because Fred almost took off the door because he was driving so fast when Andy was apparently parked in the road and working on the Kia. So it doesn't sound like there's any love lost between Andy and his cousin. They hung out as kids, but once they were adults, they went their separate ways. It sounds like they aren't enemies, but they're not friends either. Andy also said that he doesn't understand why Fred would be saying negative things about him or what his motivation is for doing this. When Andy got home on June 15th, he says he saw the Wells 3 boys outside searching. He also stated that he didn't learn of Summer being missing until he arrived home. Per Andy, Jodi Sue did not call or text him about Summer's disappearance. Andy said he parked his car and then joined in the search. He also stated that Don Wells pulled in after he got home. Other key information that Andy shared. He said no search warrant was ever served to him or Jodi Sue. He stated that he freely let law enforcement search his property and that they did grid searches on it for the first 3 days after Summer vanished. And he also stated that in all the time he's lived in Beech Creek, which is basically his entire life, no one has ever messed with him. I think what he was saying was that Beech Creek has always been a safe place for kids until this happened. Andy described the day after Summer vanished as gloomy. He said everyone was still looking for Summer and that law enforcement had the holler pretty much shut down for 5 days. The only people who could get in and get out were people who could show ID proving they had an address in Beech Creek. And then there were the tree cutters, they were allowed in as well. Andy said that he never socialized with the Wells and that he didn't really care for them. He said that the only communication he had with Donna and Candace would be when they'd call him and harass him over a couple of grams of pot. I think what he's saying by this is that the only dealings he ever had with the Wells was if they called him to buy weed. Andy also stated that Don once offered him a job, but because Andy had heard so many negative things about Don and his jobs and how he paid people, that he just wasn't interested. Andy also stated that if a person runs off and smokes crack, he doesn't want anything to do with that person. So I think Bernard was implying that Don Wells did this type of thing. Andy said he definitely noticed that Don would leave for days or months at a time. When asked if he saw anything strange going on at the Wells house, Andy replied that he once saw the Wells' 2 oldest boys fight each other with forks over a bowl of chicken noodle soup. It sounds like the boys were fighting for food. He also mentioned seeing Summer running around naked at an age when she should have had clothes on.
I'm pretty sure it was not a good environment over there. I mean, every now and then you hear them fussing, every now and but I was never there and witnessed no abuse other than the fighting over the chicken noodle soup thing, and mainly sometimes a little girl running around naked when she shouldn't have been. But
yeah, you mentioned that the little Summer would run around. She was old enough where she should have had clothes on.
Should have had clothes on, especially with 3 brothers like that. Yeah.
Did you hear Andy say that she should have had clothes on, especially with brothers like that? Nobody followed up on that or said, well, what do you mean exactly by this? I would love to know exactly what he meant by with 3 brothers like that. Andy said his life back when Summer went missing consisted of smoking pot, going to work, and coming home from work. He said there was no cheating going on. So he is claiming he did not cheat on Jodi Sue Brown. Andy also stated that there's always someone in Beech Creek creeping through the woods. He described a time when he came home from work early and saw a man looking into the windows of his house. Bernard described this man as looking like Don Wells or someone else he knows, but he can't say for sure because he was unable to catch the man. Now, this story seems to be a contradiction between what he said earlier about Beech Creek having always been a safe place. If someone is out creeping in the woods, that sounds like a place that isn't necessarily safe. Andy also talked about when Candace wanted to sell the 11-acre property at 110 Ben Hill Road when Don was off in Utah with his eldest son. Andy said he would have done everything in his power to buy that land if she had put it up for sale. It sounds like Andy is no longer living on his mother's property in Beech Creek, and it's unclear to me where he's living or if his parents basically evicted him along with Jodi Sue off the land or if he left of his own accord. If you guys know anything about that, please leave me a comment. And Bernard put the chimpanzee story to rest, saying that no one ever let monkeys loose in Beech Creek, so Andy is saying that he never heard the story that Fred Hill told. Andy also made it clear why he has his new YouTube channel, and that is that he needs money to buy a trailer. He was determined to get his Cash App info on the screen. He says he needs the trailer to get out of town for a while. Now, Jodi Sue has said that Andy doesn't need money and that he has plenty of options in terms of where he wants to live and in terms of vehicles. So who's telling the truth? It's anyone's guess. Bernard also let it slip that he's going to be talking to a lawyer today, and he made it sound like it was to talk about his children, but that's me speculating. I'm not sure. Piper of CSI cut him off, keeping him from explaining what he meant. I think Piper's got Andy's back and is trying to make sure that he doesn't get into any trouble by talking about Jodi Sue or her family, the Browns, or their kids. Perhaps the most important thing Andy said was this.
I didn't sell pills to them. I didn't give them sedatives. I mean, that's stupid. And I didn't even give the kids weed. I mean, it's not. In 2009, before I got in trouble, I wouldn't even sell to underage people. So it don't matter.
Okay.
I mean, they're not old enough to understand. They're not old enough to make the decision. It don't need to be done. And, I mean, I wouldn't give my kids nothing, so.
So Andy is claiming that he never sold drugs to the Wells children. He said, I didn't sell pills to them, didn't sell sedatives, didn't even give the kids weed. So Bernard is vehemently denying what his ex, Jodi Sue Brown, has alleged. But Bernard also said at some point that he doesn't like jail. So it's clear that he, like Don Wells, has no desire to go to jail. That could be a motivation to lie about some of this stuff. So we now have the voice of another person who was living in Beech Creek on June 15th. Will Bernard help lead us to answers about what happened to Summer? I fear not. He's saying that he has no idea where she is, what went down, and he ruled out the 5-year-old wandering off or being attacked by wildlife because they would have found her by now. And I think we can all agree upon that. Can Andy give Jodi Sue some competition on his channel? Probably, especially if he does lives that stay on target, aren't 4 hours long, that share useful information about Summer's disappearance, and that maybe shed light on Jodi Sue. I'm pretty sure everybody would love to hear what Andy has to say about his ex. Until the next time on Bed Crime Stories. Now, do me a favor, on your way out, please hit that like button, subscribe, comment, and if you want to support my channel, you can do so right there in the comments.